Tammy Jo Zywicki was a friendly, ambitious 21-year-old headed back to college for her senior year. She had spent the summer back home with her family and was driving through Illinois one day in late August when she encountered car trouble. Witnesses saw her pulled over to the side of the road, looking under the hood of her white hatchback. Hundreds of people drove by her on this highway, Interstate 80, on that busy Sunday afternoon. Some of them reported seeing a vehicle parked behind her car and a man speaking with the young blonde woman. Those people driving by didn't know what they were seeing. It looked like someone was there to help. But the travelers passing through here were witnessing the approach and execution of a near-perfect abduction right under their noses. That day, Tammy encountered something more heinous on this highway than just car trouble. She became the victim of a terrifying crime, one which is to this day still unsolved. We still don't know who took the life of Tammy Jo Zywicki. Tammy was headed back to school early to take pictures of athletes for the yearbook. She had spent the summer with her family in New Jersey and made the first half of her cross-country trip with her younger brother, Darren. Darren was attending Northwestern University that fall, and she had dropped him off in Evanston, Illinois, the night before. Her car, a white Pontiac, had been having brake and engine issues, and Darren would later tell authorities that it had overheated once in Indiana, but that they both thought the troubles with her vehicle had been resolved. However, on Sunday night, when Tammy didn't call her parents to let them know that she'd arrived, they became worried. They reached out to Tammy's college friends, none of whom had heard from Tammy, and it prompted a message scrawled across her dorm door's message board. Z, where have you been? Your mom's having a cow. When a staff member at Grinnell College told her parents that Tammy hadn't arrived to take photos of student athletes like she'd planned, worry turned to panic, and her parents, Hank and Joanne Zywicki, reached out to police in both Illinois and Iowa, the states where she had been last seen and was expected to be. All that day, Monday, August 24th, 1992, Tammy's parents panicked, calling anyone they could think of that might know where Tammy was. And then, that evening, they received news from the Illinois State Police. Tammy's car had been towed from the side of the interstate after it was found abandoned along the westbound shoulder of the highway. At this spot, mile marker 83, here. Hank and Joanne immediately submitted a missing persons report for Tammy. Her car had sat along the road for nearly 24 hours before being towed, and whoever had her had a 24-hour head start. But initially, police were unconvinced that an abduction had occurred. Illinois State Trooper Jeff Hanford said, "It looks like she walked away from the scene or took a ride, and there were no signs of a struggle." Her car had been locked, and it still had camera equipment and crates of clothing inside, undisturbed. Tammy's camera and purse were missing, but police reported no indication of foul play. Local authorities suggested that perhaps Tammy had run away. However, Tammy's family knew that something terrible had happened, so they reached out to local media. Her brother Darren told reporters, "She would have called had she gotten to a phone. I don't know what happened to her." Word of Tammy's disappearance spread at her college and Darren's. Students from Grinnell and Northwestern joined to mobilize a multi-state search for the missing co-ed. They printed and passed out flyers, sent faxes, and made phone calls. Tammy had been a popular and well-known student, friends with a lot of people. She also had been taken in an incredibly common situation, vulnerable, on the side of the road with car trouble. Anyone who has driven a car probably knows the feeling of uncertainty when a dashboard warning lights up, or a tire suddenly goes flat. Tammy's relatable trouble had turned into something terrifying. The students saw Tammy's need for help, and they also saw themselves in Tammy. Tammy had received the car, a 1985 Pontiac hatchback, for her 16th birthday. She was 21 in 1992, so while the car was no longer new, it was still only 7 years old and should have run for years to come. Hank Zywicki, Tammy's father, was an engineer, and he had looked over the car before Tammy and Darren left on their return trip to college. Aware that they may run into some issues with the vehicle, he talked with both of them about repairs and stocked it with extra oil, fan belts, and any tools he thought they might need to fix the vehicle. On Friday, August 21st, Darren and Tammy drove with her parents in separate vehicles to Pittsburgh to see family. The next day, Saturday, August 22nd, Darren and Tammy left Pittsburgh and drove the 480 miles to Evanston, Illinois. They called Hank and Joanne when they arrived to let them know that they'd made it to Northwestern University, where Darren attended school. Tammy spent the night in Evanston with a friend that she had met on a study abroad trip to Spain. And then, Sunday, August 23rd, she said goodbye to her brother and his girlfriend and departed again, this time alone. She drove south first before getting on I-80 to go west towards Iowa. She'd gone about 100 miles or so before coming to a stop at mile marker 83, having taken a break for lunch at a Hardee's at some point along the way. One of Tammy's coaches once remarked that Tammy liked cheeseburgers so much she'd be comfortable having them for breakfast. Tammy was described as friendly and athletic, an all-American girl. She enjoyed puzzles, photography, and playing soccer. She liked Tom Petty and probably blasted Free Fallin' windows rolled down while she drove. She wasn't a girly girl. She rarely wore makeup or dressed up, and she had 3 brothers, Todd, Dean, and Darren. Her family valued education and self-sufficiency. Her father, Hank, said she was a caring and friendly individual. She loved people. Friend and fellow photographer at Grinnell College, Cameo Carlson, said she was a very happy, very beautiful person. She was athletic. She had lots of friends. Tammy had been the halfback on the Grinnell College soccer team. Grinnell was a small school of about only 1,200 students. Tammy had been accepted into an internship at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and when she graduated, she thought maybe she'd teach Spanish. Tammy was a lot of things, but she wasn't naive. She was described as being responsible and with incredibly good judgment. Those that knew her insisted that she knew about the dangers of hitchhiking and wouldn't have gotten into a stranger's car alone. So, what happened that afternoon? Witnesses saw her between 3:30 and 4 p.m. stopped along the westbound shoulder of this highway, looking under the hood of her car. Someone had convinced her to go with them, maybe to get more help. Tammy didn't have a cell phone at the time, not many people did, and help would have been just a few miles away. Who was this person that connivingly convinced her to lock up and leave with them? She probably believed that he was driving her to a gas station or a mechanic nearby. One can only imagine the horror Tammy experienced riding in that passenger seat as they passed exit ramp after exit ramp. Finally, after 72 hours of no contact from Tammy, the police investigation began. There was a ground search with canines and volunteers. A police helicopter searched the area where her car had been found from the air, but there was nothing. They issued an all-points bulletin to area law enforcement, and at a press conference, they asked the public for help finding Tammy. On August 31st, More than a week after she had vanished, authorities announced that they had spoken with 60 witnesses who had seen Tammy along the highway that fateful afternoon. The 60 witnesses reported seeing 26 different vehicles pulled up behind her, which is either a testament to the many helpful drivers in Illinois or the poor reliability of eyewitness accounts. I'm not sure which. It is, of course, entirely possible that more than one person pulled over to help Tammy. There were at least 2 vehicles that multiple people remembered seeing: a green Datsun pickup and a white and brown tractor trailer. One of the witnesses who recalled seeing the semi-truck trailer reported seeing a man speaking with Tammy. The witness described the truck driver as a white male, 30 to 45 years old, 6 feet tall, with collar-length, bushy, dark hair. Authorities asked that the driver come forward and stressed that they only wanted to talk to this man and that he was not a suspect. Under the assumption that Tammy had been abducted and taken across state lines, the FBI came to the assistance of local law enforcement. FBI agent Tim Ely described the semi-truck as the best lead they had received and told reporters that it was being treated with their highest priority. The man's truck was described as a white semi-trailer truck with diagonal brown stripes on its sides, and a sketch of the vehicle was released. Agent Ely went on to say, quote, "Someone out there knows the company or individual. Somebody is going to recognize this truck," end quote. As days passed, the search ramped up. Tammy and Darren's fellow college students continued to contribute to the search. Many recruited students from other universities, friends, and acquaintances across the nation, and mailed them flyers to hand out. Thousands of flyers were distributed. Even then presidential hopeful Bill Clinton and Al Gore joined the search, distributing flyers from their tour bus. And then, on Tuesday, September 1st, 9 days after she was last seen, authorities announced that a body had been found. Hot tub installer Lonnie DeMotte had been driving his pickup truck when he pulled over to the side of the road and smelled decomposition. It was then that he spotted a bundled blanket in the shape of a body. He drove to the nearest highway patrol office and returned with an officer who cut through the blanket and saw the leg of a deceased woman. They were in southern Missouri, halfway between Springfield and Joplin. The body was in a ditch 14 feet from an entrance ramp and across from a small truck stop on Interstate 44. While the body had not been well hidden in the grasses, it had been wrapped in a full-sized white cotton sheet and a dark red blanket, duct-taped on both ends. "Body found. May not be Zywicki's," the headlines read. For nearly 3 months now, Missouri law enforcement had been on the lookout for 3 blonde women, now known as the Springfield Three. They had disappeared mysteriously earlier that summer. Teenagers Stacy McCall and Susie Streeter, and Susie's mother Cheryl, had been reported missing just 30 miles away from the location that this body had been found. Rumors swirled. Who was the dead woman? The coroner reported receiving hundreds of calls. Everyone wanted to know who she was. Authorities described her wrappings as mummy-like. Under the blankets, the woman was shoeless but fully clothed and wearing white athletic socks. This woman did not have on the clothes that Tammy had been wearing Sunday. Her brother Darren had seen Tammy off that morning and reported that she was in a white t-shirt and jean shorts. This woman had on a blue shirt and cut-off sweat shorts. Underneath that, a set of pink and white lacy underwear, completely unlike anything Tammy owned, her mother was sure. However, printed across the woman's blue shirt were the words GCRC, East Side Eagles Soccer Club, 1989 county runners-up. Tammy had played on the East Side Eagles soccer team while attending high school in Greenville, South Carolina, and she had graduated in 1989. Police in Missouri sent off for Tammy's dental records, and after a few days of silent suspense, announced that they matched. Tammy had finally been found, 520 miles southwest of where she had left her car. She did not appear to be beaten, but had bled to death after being stabbed 7 times around the heart and once in the arm. Tammy's family released a statement thanking the many volunteers and students for their help and said, quote, "We feel as much anger as sorrow at the realization of the brutal and dehumanizing conduct that occurred. We hope that some good can come out of this, including the capture of the person responsible. We don't want them to be able to kill again." End quote. At a press conference, authorities issued another plea for any driver who had pulled over to help Tammy. They stressed that they only wanted to talk to this individual and that they were not a suspect in Tammy's disappearance. However, still, no one came forward. There was an outpouring of calls from the public. Most tips focused on the tractor-trailer rig reportedly seen parked next to her car. When asked about the investigation and large number of leads, Illinois State Trooper Jeff Hanford said, "There are several ideas that we're following up on. We are trying to confirm information, and it's a tedious job." FBI spokesman Ross Rice said, "We're working on the assumption it was a truck driver, but that is subject to change." The red blanket that Tammy had been found wrapped in had been stitched with a Kenworth logo, and Kenworth is a tractor-trailer trucking company. Law enforcement pored over way station records, looking for rigs that matched the witness's description. They set up roadblocks to speak with drivers between the place where her car was abandoned and her body located. But to the Zywickis' dismay, they announced this strategy publicly before following through with it. A search of the area where her body had been found turned up no additional clues and no murder weapon. The body had laid in the ditch for at least 4 days, but up to 7. The truck stop and nearby ramp was a popular place for truckers to pull over and get some sleep. One passing motorist recalled seeing the red blanket in the ditch the previous Friday afternoon, and authorities were confident that Tammy had been killed somewhere else and dumped there in a hurry. Lawrence County Coroner Don Lakin determined that she had been killed by an array of small, sharp puncture wounds around the heart. Publicly, he declined to give many details and would not say if the stab wounds had been made through her clothing, though he did share that while the soccer clothes were hers, they were not the ones she had been seen last wearing. And this bit of information does confuse the timeline for me. When did Tammy change clothes? Or what prompted Tammy to bring a change of clothes with her when she left her car? The evidence showed that she had been sexually assaulted, and DNA was extracted from semen on those clothes. The coroner also found marks around Tammy's neck that led him to believe that her killer may have attempted to strangle her before resorting to stabbing her, creating those small puncture wounds. Following the autopsy, Tammy's body was laid to rest near Pittsburgh, where she grew up. Classes were canceled for the memorial service held on Grinnell College campus. It coincided with one attended by her family in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. College chaplain Dennis Haas told reporters that Tammy's abduction and murder had made a huge impact on the student body. He said, quote, "Even those who didn't know Tammy knew Tammy's friends, and that just spreads. Hopefully, the healing will spread." End quote. As worry and grief turned to anger and action, students vowed to help find Tammy's killer. They revised their flyers and again set out distributing them across the Midwest. Students fasted, reallocating money that they would have spent on food to a fundraiser for the search. Investigators went back to Tammy's car, retrieving evidence that Illinois State Trooper Hanford told the Joplin Globe shed light on what's going on. However, other sources stated that nothing of note was found in the car. At the impound lot, it started and ran normally. None of the fluid levels were off, and nothing seemed to be wrong with it. A soiled Hardee's napkin indicated that Tammy had checked the oil at some point after lunch, but an unopened oil container indicated that something else had been the issue with her car. Between the discovery of Tammy's body and a close search of her vehicle, several things were determined to be missing. $140. A musical watch that played "Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head." It looked similar to the one in this picture, provided by the FBI. It had a green band and a green umbrella on the face. Tammy's camera, a 35mm Canon. The clothes she had been last seen in, her shoes, a white t-shirt, and jean shorts. And perhaps taken even as a trophy, a patch that looked like this one was missing from the shorts that she had been found wearing. Authorities had already processed and investigated hundreds of leads, but just 2 weeks into their investigation, FBI agent Bob Long was feeling pessimistic. He told Joplin Globe reporter Jim Sir that he didn't know if Tammy's case was solvable, saying, quote, "Nothing has given us that piece of evidence that's going to solve this case. This one's going to be very, very tough," end quote. Law enforcement felt that the description they had for the man last seen with Tammy was too generic to be of much use. The family was also frustrated with the investigation. They felt that crucial time had been lost in those first few days. Tammy's father, Hank Zywicki, told Oprah, "The authorities wasted a lot of time by asking questions about boyfriends and basically calling people just to check her personality, her credibility. We feel, if nothing else, they should also pursue the avenue of checking for a possible situation, as it actually turned out for her." They also told reporters that the investigating agencies in the 2 separate states, Illinois and Missouri, were not communicating with each other, and not communicating with them either. It had been disappointing to hear breaking news about their daughter's investigation from the media. Despite their frustrations, at that time, they were still confident that their daughter's killer would be found. They agreed to be on Oprah, only with the hopes that it would generate a tip that could break open the case and locate the killer. To address issues with interagency communication, a task force was formed. Staffed by investigators from Illinois, Missouri, and the FBI, this team worked round the clock investigating leads into more than 1,500 vehicles in just the first 2 months. They spent time following up on several other 100 leads as well. Investigators consider highway homicides to be among some of the most difficult to solve. Victims may be hitchhikers or runaways, traveling long distances from their home states and dumped many hundreds of miles from where they are picked up. Many remain unidentified. Notably, the truck seen near Tammy's car that afternoon did not have a sleeper cab on it. So while the investigation spanned many states, detectives believed that the killer was local to the Midwest. Authorities began to look at other recent murders, searching for similarities. In Ohio, 8 truck stop prostitutes had been killed in the previous decade. Though there was no evidence conclusively linking the murders, authorities suspected that there was a truck-driving serial killer on the loose. However, Tammy was far from this killer's typical victim type. 20-year-old Lori Deppes from Appleton, Wisconsin, had disappeared August 19th, just 4 days before Tammy. And Candace Harms, a freshman at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, had disappeared also from her car on September 22nd, about a month after Tammy. Investigators probed these cases for links to Tammy's murder, but nothing conclusively connected them. While the Springfield Three had gone missing from the area where Tammy's body was found, the unique circumstances of their disappearance contrasted with the broad daylight abduction of Tammy led investigators to conclude that their cases were not linked. Grieving and dealing with the uncertainty of finding Tammy's killer, when her parents drove back to Iowa to visit the Grinnell College campus, they took Interstate 88, avoiding this road and the route that Tammy was abducted from entirely. There, they established a scholarship in Tammy's name and discussed the hunt for her killer at a press conference. Joanne said, "It may be 2 months, it may be 2 years, but we feel he will be caught." But 2 months, 2 years, and then 20 passed. The task force created to solve Tammy's case disbanded in 1993 after investigating a lot of suspects, mostly truck drivers linked to other killings across the nation. 2 different men on this suspect list are named Lonnie, which is surely just a stupid coincidence. The man that found Tammy's body was also named Lonnie. There are 3 different Lonnies associated with this case. It's just odd because it's not that common of a name. Lonnie Spells had been arrested in Ohio 4 days after Tammy disappeared. He was a truck driver who had killed a young woman from Memphis and dumped her body near Dallas. Then there was Lonnie Bierbrot. He was an ex-convict from Peru, Illinois, near to the location of Tammy's abduction. He had done prison time for armed robberies, and once paroled, took a job as a truck driver, driving a Kenworth truck. He also had a house in Missouri not far from where her body was found. Lonnie Bierbrot had been investigated first in 1993, swabbed for DNA, and released. However, years later, a former police officer for the state of Illinois and private investigator Martin McCarthy told reporters about Bierbrot, saying, "There is no question in my mind this guy murdered Tammy Zywicki," end quote. He had spoken with a witness who believed that she had seen Lonnie standing next to Tammy that afternoon on I-80. He also had allegedly given his wife a musical watch, similar to the one Tammy was missing. But in response, FBI agent Ross Rice told the Associated Press that Bierbrot was thoroughly investigated and dismissed as a suspect. Unfortunately, the DNA recovered from Tammy's clothes had been a very small amount, too small to be of much use in 1992. As time passed, DNA technology has seen great advancements, but it's unclear if the DNA given by Lonnie Bierbrot was compared to the sample found on Tammy, or what caused the FBI to dismiss him as a suspect. Lonnie Bierbrot passed away in 2002. Also in 2002, to acknowledge the 10th anniversary of Tammy's death, the FBI announced that they were offering a $50,000 reward for any information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person responsible for Tammy's kidnapping and murder. Then, in 2007, almost 15 years after Tammy's passing, detectives took a look at Bruce Mendenhall. He was a truck driver from Albion, Illinois, who confessed to 6 killings across multiple states, though Tammy was not included in that 6. Bruce had been a truck driver for 20 years, and investigators spent weeks scrutinizing his trucking routes to determine if he had been anywhere in this vicinity. Unfortunately, detectives were unable to use this paper trail to rule out the possibility of his involvement. And while initially cooperative, Mendenhall stopped working with detectives. He is currently serving a life sentence in prison for the murders of Sarah Hulbert and Samantha Winters. In 2015, the Illinois State Police turned over the case to VIDOC, a private crime-solving group staffed by retired forensic and law enforcement professionals. But even with their experience and expertise, no major breakthroughs were announced. Most recently, detectives considered Clark Perry Baldwin. He was an Iowa trucker whose DNA has been tied to the deaths of 3 women found dumped in Wyoming and Tennessee in the 1990s. But as they did with so many others, investigators ruled him out as a suspect in Tammy's case. When you think about it, the amount of murderous truck drivers roaming the roads is truly terrifying. Her family packed up Tammy's things and gave most of them to charity, saving only a few soccer plaques, yearbooks, and pictures to remember her by. They saved her seashells and jewelry box, which Joanne keeps on her dresser. She is especially missed at weddings and Christmas. Tammy's father, Hank, died in 2015, and Joanne now lives in Florida. She told reporters that the grief never goes away. While Joanne does not yet have justice for her daughter's murder, she does still have hope. Technology has come so far since 1992, and DNA advancements may now allow a better analysis of the small sample found on Tammy's clothes. It may even mean that investigators can test and find DNA on the sheet or blankets she was wrapped in, or the duct tape used to bind her body. Whether or not investigators are using modern technology to look into Tammy's death is unknown, but there is a change.org petition online for Tammy's case, and it requests an official statement from the Illinois State Police with basic facts, current status, and new developments in her investigation. A statement like this from authorities could renew public interest and generate important leads. I'll link that petition in my description so that you can check it out for yourself. Tammy loved puzzles. Her mom said once she'd never leave a puzzle unfinished. But her murder has puzzled investigators now for more than 30 years. It doesn't have to be that way. Somewhere, someone has a soccer club patch that doesn't belong to them. Someone had a watch with a green band that played "Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head." This is a puzzle that can be finished, a case that can be solved. And there is a reward of up to $50,000 for information leading to the identification of the individual or individuals responsible for Tammy's death. Anyone with information is asked to contact the FBI.